Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto awakens his ancestors' bloodline and becomes the Nero Devil Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. At a small ramen stand in the city of Konoha there was a small group of 4 people there enjoying a nice meal of ramen for dinner. 3 of these people looked alike in some regards, obviously meaning that these people were family. The woman had long black hair that went half down her back and black eyes with pale skin. She was wearing a dark blue shirt and beige pants. She was Makoto Uchiha. The teenager there had dark brown hair and tan skin that separated them in that department. He was wearing the standard Anbu uniform without the mask, and then the little girl who sat next to a boy. The little girl was about 6 and looked like a miniaturized version of her mother with the same black hair and black eyes. She was wearing a blue yukata with peach blossoms that went down past her knees with a red obi that had with the Uchiha symbol on the back of it. This was Satsuki Uchiha. The one that stood out the most though was the little boy. He was also 6 and had spiky sun-kissed blonde hair that seemed to go in every direction possible with bright blue eyes. His most noticing was the 3 whisker marks, and he was wearing a white shirt with a red swirl on the back and orange shorts. He had big goofy grin on his face that seemed to show pure happiness while he ate his ramen. This one was Naruto Uzumaki. Makoto had a good idea on who his parents were and went to the Sandaime about it. When she told him her theories and who she believed to be Naruto's parents, the Sandaime sighed and told her the truth about who Naruto's parents were. After his explanation he asked Makoto to keep it a secret and to not tell Naruto out of fear that he would tell people that he was the son Yondaime, and then Iwa would send assassins to kill Naruto since he was the son of the man who was hated by everyone in Iwa. Makoto at first wouldn't agree and told him that he deserved to know of his parents and his burden. Sarutobi begged her to not tell him and asked her if any child deserves to know that they bear such a burden. It took a little more convincing until Makoto finally agreed. Before she left however she said, "Know this Sarutobi, if anything happens to him, it's your fault, because you lacked the backbone to protect him when he needed help." As they ate their ramen with gorging down like there was no tomorrow, that today would be his last day on Earth. "Hey Naruto, the academy will be starting up soon, will you be joining it too?" Satsuki asked curiously. "Yeah, I can't wait, I'm so excited. I'll be a step closer to being the Hokage," Naruto said. "True, you'll be a step closer, but you would still have a long way to go before you can make that dream come true," Itachi said with a small smirk. "Itachi, don't be such a downer or you'll grow wrinkles at this rate. Just enjoy the moment," Makoto chastised. The small group laughed, or in Itachi's case chuckled. They enjoyed their ramen peacefully and laughed, but all things must come to an end sooner or later. Soon they had to go their separate ways. Naruto was sad that it came to an end even though to him it seemed to just begin. "See you tomorrow Naruto," Satsuki said as she hugged Naruto with a smile on her face. Naruto didn't know why she had a small tint of red on her cheeks. "Take care of yourself Naruto," Itachi said as he ruffled his hair. Makoto then came up to him and hugged him and said, "Goodbye, see you tomorrow." Naruto turned around and started to walk back to his apartment until he heard a little girl's voice say, "Naruto. Wait." Naruto turned around and saw Satsuki running up to him with something in her pocket. Naruto looked at Satsuki and asked, "Something wrong Satsuki?" Satsuki looked at him with a smile, causing Naruto to smile, and she said, "Naruto, hold out your hand please, I got a surprise for you." Naruto did as he was told and closed his eyes, and after a few seconds he felt something cold in his hand. When Naruto opened his eyes he saw a golden locket in the shape of an oval. Naruto looked up at her and saw that she had smile on her pale face. "Naruto, there's more to it, watch." She pressed a small button on the side of it and Naruto heard a small click. When Naruto heard the click he saw that half of the locket could now move freely. Naruto lifted the other half of the locket and saw a photo of him and Satsuki with their arms around each other and a smile on their faces. On the other side of it Naruto saw an inscription that said, "Never forget," and couldn't help but like it even more. Naruto looked up at her and gave her his big goofy grin and hugged the girl and said, "Thank you so much, Satsuki." Satsuki would have said something if she was not currently lost in La La Land. Satsuki's face was as red as a tomato. Naruto didn't know, but her family did know that she had a crush on the blonde for a while now, since a couple of months since they first met when they were 4. "Well, Naruto, I got to go see you to Tomar tomorrow," Satsuki stuttered. She then ran off, heading back towards her family. After she left, Naruto stuffed the locket into his pocket as he heard people whispering, and several of them were along the lines of, "Hey look, it's the Kyuubi brat, and what was the other child doing with that thing?" One villager whispered. "That crest, wasn't that the symbol of the Uchiha clan on that other kid's clothes? What was a member of the Uchiha clan doing with that thing?" As Naruto made his way back to his apartment, he ignored the looks and glares that the people were sending and kept up the image he wanted them to see. The image that he wanted them to see a happy-go-lucky kid. Naruto's thoughts then moved to his precious people, mainly that family. Naruto enjoyed every moment he spent with those people there, because unlike most of the people in Konoha who glared at him with hatred, those people accepted him with open arms. Naruto treated every day like it was his last day alive and cherished every moment for a reason. He didn't know if it would truly be his last day alive. He wasn't a fool like the people thought he saw. He noticed the glares, the hatred they sent his way. What he did know was that it involved the fox that attacked 6 years ago. He went to the Sandaime and asked him about it, but all he told him was that they were misguided, that you aren't what they think you are. That wasn't enough for him. Didn't he have a right to know why they hated him, why they scorned him when he did nothing to them at all? Sometimes he wondered who the real monsters in this village were. Was it him like they claimed he was, or was it them who beat him and blame him for something that he never did? The last time Naruto cried was 2 years ago. After another beating, Naruto decided that he had enough crying. He wanted to leave this place, yet he couldn't. He had a lot of money. What he lacked was the ability to protect himself. He didn't have any weapons or powers that could aid him if he got into trouble, so he figured that it would be best to wait before he made any attempts. When Naruto stood in front of the building, he opened the door and saw the graffiti on the walls. The graffiti said, "Monster," and several other profanities. Naruto ignored them, as he also ignored the scamper of rats and roaches in the building. He didn't care about them anymore. When he first tried to get rid of them to make this place better, they just came back. Eventually Naruto stopped caring and trying to get them to leave. Naruto stood in front of the door to his apartment and opened the door. It was the only reasonably clean place in the entire building. It was a decent place. It had the necessities and next to no possessions of major value. But that was enough for him. All he needed was the essentials to survive. As soon as he entered the room, the smile he had faded away into a cold and calculating look. He looked over at the rug and moved it to the side, revealing hatch to a tunnel that led out of the building. This room was the very reason why he chose a room on the first level to begin with. Not even the Hokage knew of the trapdoor the building he lived in. It was the very reason why he chose this building to live in of all places. One day he was being chased by a mob and went into this very building in the very room he now lived in. The Hokage tried to convince him to change his mind, but Naruto stood firm and didn't change his mind. One day he figured that he could use this tunnel to escape the leaf, but for now he had to wait. Naruto placed the rug over the hatch and then made his way to the bed. After he fell, he closed his eyes, hoping that he would get the questions to his answers soon. As fate would have it, he would get the answers that he wanted and so much more. Naruto's mindscape. When Naruto opened his eyes, he found himself in a whole new place. It looked like a sewer, if the water any indication. He looked around and noticed some pipes on the roof were glowing light blue with a slight tint of red. Naruto began to follow the pipes until he came to a large room where the only thing that resided there was a giant cage door. Naruto walked closer to inspect it and saw that the gates were being held together by a single slip of paper with the kanji for seal written on it. "Is anyone in there?" Naruto called out loudly. For a moment nothing happened. Then it came a loud swish sound that made him jump back just as a large clawed paw slammed into the gate. A loud chuckle came from within the darkness of the giant cage. Then the thing that had attacked him came into view. It was huge, its body was covered in reddish-orange colored fur, burning red eyes. But the most notable feature of the creature was the 9 tails swinging back and forth behind it. "You're the..." Naruto began as he stared at the beast with a cold and calculating look on his face. "The Kyuubi no Kitsune," the creature finished for him. "So the Kyuubi is sealed inside of me, that answers several questions then." Kyuubi raised an eyebrow and said, "You are smarter than you let people think you are, interesting. I do the last thing I need is even more people out there trying to kill me." "True enough." Naruto glared at him and said, "You know everything due to you being inside your host, correct?" "Yes, I do, so everything my host knows I know since I am inside of them." "So Kyuubi, do you know who my parents are?" Naruto asked curiously, having a feeling that the fox knew who they were. Kyuubi gulped, having a bad feeling that the kid wasn't going to like what he heard next. "Your mother was Kushina Uzumaki, my former vessel, who was related to Mito Uzumaki, the first Hokage's wife. She died the night of me being sealed into you, if you think that she abandoned you." "And my father?" Naruto asked as he glared at the fox, wondering why his status as a Jinchuriki was revealed and not his mother's, and Mito's status wasn't. The old man knew that and didn't bother to hide his status. Naruto was angry at the old man and his anger was growing by the minute. "Your father was the Yondaime Hokage who sealed me into you." Naruto's anger was growing even larger by the minute. He had a scowl on his face and asked, "Did anyone offer to take his place in the sealing?" Kyuubi nodded with a solemn look on his face and said, "Yes, the old man as you call him, and your godfather, who, if I remember right, his name was Jiraiya the Toad Sage." "My godfather?" Naruto growled out, his anger finally reaching the breaking point. Naruto's glare intensified and his face showed rage, pure rage at being lied to so many times by the old man about why he was hated and who his parents were, all that he had to suffer because of that one man, because of his own father. Naruto yelled out in hatred for his father. "That bastard!" Naruto got down on his knees in his mindscape and was currently unknowingly drawing on Kyuubi's chakra around his body. He started slamming his arms down in anger on the floor of the mindscape. Naruto started screaming out in frustration and anger. If he was paying attention to the outside world, he would have noticed a purplish blue aura started to surround him and his eyes were starting to glow red. They glowed so brightly that there seemed to be nothing in them but a bright red glow. There wasn't anything else at all in those eyes except the red glow. Kyuubi could only stare, wondering what was happening, until a familiar scent had hit his snout. "This scent, it can't be. I thought that the line died ages ago." Kyuubi thought as he watched the boy. The boy stood up and Kyuubi saw, instead of a blonde hair and tan skin boy, he saw a silver-haired and pale-skinned boy with glowing red eyes. However, his most notable change was his right arm. His right arm now looked like a demon's instead of a human's. The skin was now a glowing blue and seemed to be under a red articulated armor that resembled a lizard's skin. The hand was now a claw and seemed to glow brighter as the seconds passed. Kyuubi stared at him with his mouth hanging until he finally managed to say, You are a descendant of Sparta." "Sparta? Who's Sparta?" Kyuubi cleared his throat, knowing that this story was probably going to take some time to do. "Long ago, almost 8,000 years back or something like that, there was a full-out war between humans and demons. Humans fought to preserve their race and the demons to destroy it. The demons were led by a powerful demon prince named Mundus. Mundus wanted control of the entire human world. He amassed an army and selected demons of great power to lead them. One was named Sparta. At first, Sparta fought the humans and with his army, slaughtered many. However, one day, according to legend, he woke up to justice, which I believe is a load of bullshit, anyway. He turned on Mundus and his fellow demons and fought against them. Single-handedly, he fought Mundus's armies until he finally returned to hell to defeat Mundus himself. They fought long and hard until finally he defeated Mundus. He sealed Mundus away and forced his armies to separate. He poured his entire being into his sword and sealed the portal to the demon realm. He then set demonic guards to keep the portal safe and then disappeared, only appearing in various times throughout the ages to protect humanity. After that, Sparta ruled over the humans for a time. He eventually vanished into history. He was a legend to the human world and was known as the legendary Dark Knight Sparta. Sparta eventually met a human woman named Eva, and eventually married her and had 2 sons, twins. Kyuubi then told him about Sparta's twin sons and their weapons Yamato and Rebellion. I remember that the weapons were hidden so others couldn't get them, but they are protected by powerful allies that the twin sons had. They're most likely devils that they beaten in combat to obtain. You should wait a bit when you are much stronger before you make any attempts to retrieve them. Your arm also might lead us to them as well. Naruto had a contemplative look on his face as he thought over the story. Everyone thought that all demons and devils were evil and untrustworthy demon. Naruto could only think that he was descended of people that had actually managed to overcome hell itself and win. Kyuubi told him of how demonic society worked and the devil arms that are achieved through defeating a demon of sufficient power. Kid, I'm willing to cut a deal with you. In exchange for a small amount of freedom, I shall become your first devil arm. Why the hell are you willing to help me? Naruto asked. Demons were devious. He knew that you should never trust no matter what the offer was. He figured that it probably wasn't like them to just offer up their power to anyone. Because Spartans are notoriously powerful and won't be killed easily. Even without this power you've unlocked, I've been watching you, kid. I know I can't corrupt you enough to let the seal off even if I tried. With this power, you would just resist me even more anyway. At least with this, I can get some form of freedom. Naruto thought it over and he would need a weapon that would help him out in the future. Fine, we have a deal, so what happens now? Naruto saw that the mindscape and Kyuubi was starting to fade away and asked, what's happening? It would seem that you are waking up. I see. Can I talk to you again? Naruto asked the giant fox who had a smirk on his face. This is your mindscape. All you have to do is think what you want to say and I will hear you. Even though I will be a weapon, we will be able to communicate with each other. If you need an example, it will be as if you are a Jinchuriki without a demon sealed inside of you, the fox responded. One more thing, what's your name? I doubt that Kyuubi is your real name, Naruto said as he began to fade away. You're right, Kyuubi said, it's Kurama. Before Naruto faded away, he nodded, showing that he heard the fox's name. Reality. Naruto opened his eyes and took in a large gasp of air. Naruto took several calming breaths and then looked at his right arm, which now looked like a demon's arm. Naruto flexed the arm and rolled his hand around. It felt like it never changed at all, that it was still the same arm. Naruto looked in the mirror and saw that his skin was pale and that his hair had turned into light silver in color and it was no longer spiky at all. He then lifted the shirt off of his boy and saw that he now had a tattoo of a red fox head surrounded by fire on his right bicep, but the most noticeable change was the whisker marks, or better yet, lack of. His most noticeable feature gone, like it was never there. I got to tell the old man. Naruto thought as he made his way towards the door. Naruto grabbed the knob to the door, but before he opened the door another thought entered his head. Why let him know, when he was the one who let them have their way with you, who lied to you so many times in the past? Naruto stopped thinking of a reason why. A reason to tell him of the change, but no matter how hard he thought, no reason came to mind. Nothing at all to add to the argument that he should. In fact, the reason to not tell him and leave just increased. Soon Naruto's hand left the handle and another thought entered his head. This is it. This is it. This is the perfect time to leave. I don't look anything like my old self. I got the way out of the leaf, but they'll just send people out looking for me if I just leave, so what to do? Kurama, you there? Yeah, I'm here. What do you need? Do you know a jutsu that makes physical clones? Yes, the shadow clone jutsu. It will make solid clones and all the information will be passed down to you when they are destroyed. Your mother used this one a lot. How do I do it? To do the shadow clone jutsu, you have to make a ram sign, and to save us both time, since you'll ask anyway, make a cross sign. What are you planning? Let's just say through the ashes of one a new life is born. Naruto got his hands into the cross position and made several clones. He then had the clones use the transformation jutsu that Itachi taught him to turn them into random people. Since the academy was going to be starting soon, Itachi decided to help train Naruto and Satsuki in the basic jutsus of the academy, which were the transformation, substitution, and even the clone jutsu, which Naruto failed horribly at doing. Alright, one of you guys go get a couple bottles of beer and another of you go get a lighter. Here's some cash, Naruto said as he handed some money to two clones. The clones nodded, each of them running off to get their respective item. The rest of you keep watch for any Anbu until the other two come back, this all depends on luck and timing. The clones nodded and left the room to blend in with the people, leaving Naruto alone, who was now moving the rug off the hatch. Naruto moved towards the window and looked up at the night sky. He couldn't help but want to stay, not for Konoha, but for Satsuki. Naruto dug his demonic arm into his pocket and pulled out the locket that Satsuki gave him. He opened the locket and looked at the picture inside of it. He stared at it for a few minutes in silence. His head then dropped and he had a few tears rolling down his face. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Naruto wiped the tears away and then made his way to his bed. Naruto took out a black hoodie and a black glove. He placed the glove over his hand and then put on the jacket. He then crouched down and pulled out a backpack from under his bed. Naruto filled the bag with his clothes, food, and a journal. Naruto placed the bag on his back and then turned his head to the door when he heard a knock. A clone opened the door and said, "Boss, they're back, what's next?" Naruto went to the blanket on his bed and started to rip it into shreds. He took the shreds and gave it to the clone and said, "Have the others make a couple Molotovs and then have them throw them into the building. I'll take the secret way out through the tunnel and be outside of Konoha's wall after you guys set the place on fire. Then find a secluded place and see the people's reaction, but after that immediately dispel yourself, got it?" The clone nodded and said, "Sure thing, boss, good luck and hope you don't get caught." The clone then left the room. Naruto quickly opened the hatch and jumped down the hole and then closed the hatch, before he ran down the tunnel as fast as he could, never looking back. The clones that Naruto created were standing outside the building with the Molotovs lit and ready to be thrown. One clone said, "Ready, boys." The rest of the clones nodded and then threw their respective Molotovs through the windows of the building. It didn't take too long for the fire to spread out and smoke to rise up into the sky. The building was soon completely ablaze. One clone stepped forward and said, "Guys, we got to go now, they're bound to notice this." "Right, let's go." The clones then ran as fast as they could in a different direction. If they were caught, it didn't matter, but it would draw suspicion that Naruto wanted to avoid. The clones easily found a hiding place among the many buildings and alleyways in the district. They watched as several Anbu showed up and performed some water jutsu to hopefully put out the flames before the flames could spread to other buildings in the area. Then they saw the old man himself appear with a look of horror on his face. There were several Anbu around him and one with a dog mask on his face with gravity-defying silver hair. They couldn't see his face, but they knew that he was afraid and hoping that Naruto got out. People started coming out of their homes and saw that the building that the demon lived in was on fire. The Hokage and silver-haired Anbu tried to run in and see if Naruto was in the building, but they were stopped by several Anbu that grabbed them and prevented them from going in. Just as the Hokage was about to command them to let him go, the building started to collapse on itself, and with a loud crash the building had fallen in on itself. The Anbu had let them go and did several more water jutsus to douse the remaining flames. The Hokage got down on his knees as tears were starting to fall down his face. The Hokage raised his hand and then made a fist as he slammed it into the ground. One of the clones managed to hear him say, "Naruto, I'm so sorry, I should have done more, but I allowed my stupid belief to blind me, please forgive me." The Anbu that tried to run in also got down on his knees and slammed it into the ground. He then let out a scream of sadness and anguish. The civilians that saw him as a demon were cheering in happiness that the demon was dead. The clones, having enough, decided to dispel themselves to stop watching this event. Naruto. Naruto reached the end of the tunnel and kicked open the door to the tunnel. Light immediately flooded into the tunnel. Naruto went through and took in a large whiff of fresh air. Naruto then let out a content sigh and thought, feels good to breathe in fresh air after being in that tunnel. So Naruto, where are we going? Kurama asked. No, that doesn't feel right anymore, Naruto thought. What doesn't feel right? That name, my name, it doesn't feel right anymore. That's what my par, no, that's what Minato and Kushina called me, but it doesn't feel right anymore. Naruto died in that fire today, and from Naruto Uzumaki's ashes, Nero Sparta was born. That's who I am now. I am Nero Sparta and I will make my mark on the world. I know you will, boy, I know you will. Naruto. Now Nero then made his way north as he let the wind be his guide. If he bothered to look back at the village, he would see smoke rising up into the sky. The clones, memories entered his head and he shook his head, refusing to think about it. However, even though he was leaving a place that had hated him since he was born, there were tears going down his face. Those tears weren't for the leaf, they were for leaving the person closest to his heart. The Sandaime Hokage was angry and sad at the same time. Tears were streaming down his face as he sat in his office. The pain of failing not only Minato and Kushina, but also Naruto had hurt more than anything else in his life. He had let the one thing that Minato left behind to suffer a life worse than death. He allowed himself to be pushed around out of fear and senile belief that they would honor Minato's wish. He should have done what was done with Kushina and Mito and kept it a secret, but since he didn't, an innocent boy had to suffer and die at an age that no child should. When he finally managed rein in his emotions, he signaled Kakashi, Kurenai, Itachi, Enko, and Yugao forward and told them the truth of Naruto's heritage and told them everything about his godparents. Kurenai, Enko, and Yugao started to cry while Itachi's eyes were moist as a small trail of tears fell from Itachi's eyes. Kakashi, though, held his head down in sadness. As much as he wanted to cry, his tears were already spent, with his red eye as proof showing that he had been crying for a while. When all of them had regained control over their emotions, he signaled the Anbu hidden in the room away and said, I want all of you to go on a rank mission for me. I want you to track down Tsunade and Jiraiya and get them back into the village as soon as possible. I plan to make them pay for ignoring their duties as Naruto's godparents when they should have been here and done more. But I let my own belief blind me to what I should have done and forced them to at least come back and check up on him. If they don't come back through persuasion, then give them a threat. Tell them that if they don't come back, then I will mark them both as S-rank missing nin. The Sandaime had a dark look on his face as he handed them the letters, saying that if they don't come back, then they will be marked as S-rank missing nin. The assembled ninjas nodded their heads with determined eyes and then left the office to bring back the Sannin that were supposed to watch over Naruto. Despite all the good that Jiraiya's spy network did in protecting Konoha, he never even bothered to get to know his own godson. He should have forced Tsunade to come back and helped her get over it, but he didn't, simply letting her do what she wanted. Sarutobi down at his chair and looked at a pile of paperwork. He then sighed as a memory of what happened a couple years ago when Naruto went to the park. He remembered the way the civilians and shinobi alike stared at him when he arrived at the playground. Naruto walked towards the center of the park, but stopped when he noticed the stares that people were giving him. He then crumbled his hat as he remembered his hat as another memory entered his head. He remembered a child probably a year or two older than Naruto punch him in the face. The two child began to fight with other kids joining in the battle. It soon became an all-out brawl, all the kids beating up the blonde. Sarutobi got himself ready to help Naruto stop, but stopped when he saw the parents come up to their children and led them away. But his blood froze when, instead of hearing the parents reprimand their children for beating up the blonde, they congratulated them instead for the deed. Sarutobi raised his hands up toward his face and covered his face. That memory wasn't the first of a time he didn't help the blonde out of a jam. It was one of several others where he didn't help him out of fear. Fear of being of the part of the minority that didn't see him as the demon, When he saw Satsuki and the other members that were part of his Anbu and some Jonin help the blonde, he had wished that he had their courage to do what they could. He had wished countless times that he had the strength and courage that they had, the strength and courage that proved that they weren't afraid to be part of the minority. But then again, he was the one who had set the line when he followed Minato's wish and told everyone about the Kyuubi. He should have done what was done with Mito and Kushina and kept it a secret that only he knew, then he wouldn't be afraid to be part of the minority. Minato, what use was the peace you gave us, if we can't thank the one person who you wanted to be seen as a hero for giving us this peace most of all? Sarutobi had tears falling down his cheeks as he remembered Naruto, who was sitting by himself as tears fell down his cheeks. Minato, your child had done nothing to deserve this fate. No one deserves to die so young, but with what you did to him. You had cursed him to a life of hell by not letting me or Jiraiya do it. He then thought of what Minato truly did to his own son and what the term Jinchuriki truly meant. Jinchuriki was loosely translated and meant human sacrifice. Jinchurikis weren't a sacrifice because they were given to the demons. They were a sacrifice because they were sacrificed in the name of peace. They were the very scapegoat for the leaders of villages and civilians alike. They were the very physical manifestation of the people's fears. They were sacrificed not to the demon, but to the very populace that they worked to protect. The Jinchurikis weren't a sacrifice of their own will. They were called and forced to be a sacrifice. They were called to sacrifice any semblance of a normal life, sacrifice their families and sacrifice any precious bonds that they might have had with someone else. The very fate that Minato had casted on Naruto the night the Kyuubi attacked Konoha, the very fate he casted on his own son. He then crumbled his hat more as the tears fell freely down his face. Minato, you stupid fool, you stupid and noble fool. Why did you have to be so stupid and leave your own son alone in this world that many would hate him for what you did to him despite your wish? Lord Hokage, a bare-masked Anbu said worryingly as he entered the room. He had heard of Naruto's death and knew that the Hokage had held the boy not only in high regard, but also very close to his heart as well. He didn't want to do this and tell the Hokage that the council had called for his presence, but was afraid of what the council would do to him if he didn't. The Hokage turned to the Anbu, but couldn't hide the tears that freely fell down his face. The Anbu felt saddened when he saw those tears and feel a pang of sadness hit his heart. He, like a few others, didn't see the boy as a demon and saw him as a person who was cursed at birth with being the container of Kyuubi. The only one of said group that didn't know of his condition was the small Uchiha girl who seemed to be the only child around his age that accepted him. What is it, Bear? The Hokage asked in strained voice. The Anbu was quiet for a moment and sighed as he gathered the strength and said, Lord Hokage, the council has requested your presence on the matter of Naruto Uzumaki's death. The Anbu looked up at his leader waiting for his reply and saw that the Hokage's head was down. When the Hokage raised his head instead of the eyes of a broken man, he saw the eyes of a man who looked ready for war. The tears still streamed down his cheeks, but his eyes showed an iron will that would break only in death. The Hokage turned toward the Anbu and felt like bowing, feeling the aura of the shinobi that was known throughout the world as the god of shinobi. Tell them I will be there soon after I settle some things. The Anbu nodded and quickly left the room using the shunshin. After the Anbu left, Sarutobi turned and looked at the fourth's head on the Hokage monument. Minato, I'm sorry that I didn't have the will to protect your son until it was too late to do anything to protect your son. I will not have your son be remembered as the Kyuubi's reincarnation. And for that I most break what I thought I would never do until he was a Chunin, but he cannot be harmed by Iwa and Kuma when he is already dead. It is time that the people learned of what they had done to the savior. The last though that the Hokage had before he left the room was, Naruto, I hope you can forgive this old fool for not having the strength and courage to be there for you. I hope that you can forgive me wherever you are. Council chambers. The Hokage made his way toward the council chambers with a face that seemed to be set in stone and a will made of iron. When he reached the door to the chambers, he opened the door and made his way towards his chair in the chambers with the intent to make sure that Naruto would not be remembered as the Fox Reborn, but as the hero who the people of Konoha had scorned, beaten, and in the end killed. They would know that they had did a unredeemable act by what they did to him, that no matter how hard they tried, the stain of such an act would never be removed. They had not only killed a child, but the son of their hero who they saw as a hero, but had damned the one thing that he had left behind and wanted to be seen as a hero. The Hokage would make sure that they know that even if it took a river of blood for them to understand their crimes. After the Hokage sat down in his chair, a man on his left who was one of his former teammates known as Homura Mitokado. Homura was depicted with gray hair, a beard, glasses, as well as a constant frown that he had always worn, even in his youth. He also had a strong jawline, a facial structure he had retained even in his old age. As a member of the Konoha Council, he wore similar garbs to those that Hiruzen would when acting in his capacity as Hokage. A woman on his right, where the shinobi side was, sat his other former teammate, Kaharu Udatane. In her youth, Kaharu was a beautiful kunoichi with dark eyes. Her hair was pulled back in a twin bun locked by a traditional Japanese hairpin with two pearls dangling off the side. In her old age, she maintained her original hairstyle without the bangs. The pearls on her hair needle have also increased and tassels were added to the other end. Her earrings were also considerably longer. As a member of the Konoha Council, Kaharu wore a simple long kimono, closed by an obi, a jacket, and a sash over it. In the back of the room where no one could see him was a man known as Danzo, was Hiruzen's rival since they were kids and was always overshadowed by Hiruzen's accomplishments. Danzo appeared as an old frail man, who would normally walk with a cane. He had black shaggy hair, and his right eye was kept bandaged. Danzo has had an X-shaped scar on his chin ever since his youth. He wore a white shirt, with a brown robe over top of it covering from his feet to just over his right shoulder. The robe concealed his right arm, which was bandaged, and covered with 3 big golden braces. He looked like a man that had endured numerous battles, but he had a personality that made a brick seem lively. On the right side of the council sat the Shinobi Council, which consisted of the clan heads from the clans that helped made up Konoha's shinobi forces. It consisted of Shikaku Nara, Choza Akamichi, Inoichi Yamanaka, Sum Inazuka, and Fugaku Uchiha, who was Itachi and Satsuki's father and Makoto's husband. On the left side was the civilian council made up of rich merchants and somewhat influential people who had some ties with others. One that stood out had bubble-gum pink hair and emerald eyes. She was wearing a pink kimono with yellow trimmings and large earrings in her ears. She was Akemi Haruno, one of the more influential civilian members of the council. Danzo stepped out of the shadows and made his way towards Sarutobi and said, "Sarutobi, you took quite some time getting here. As the Hokage, you know that you shouldn't keep the council waiting." The Hokage was quiet and didn't even bother looking in Danzo's direction. Danzo, who was annoyed that his old rival was ignoring him, was about to yell at him, but stopped when he felt Sarutobi's killing intent. Everyone in the room was afraid when they felt that killing intent. The last time any of them had felt any killing intent from him was the night when Kyuubi was sealed into him and a member of the civilian council members said to kill Naruto despite him being a baby. "Danzo," the old man said, that sent a chill down everyone's spine. "I am the Hokage, the leader of this village. You are an advisor, which means that you are to give me advice, not tell me what to do." The Hokage then turned away from Danzo and turned towards the civilian members and glared at them. All of the civilian members tensed up and were close to shitting themselves from his glare. The Hokage then said harshly, "I hope you are all proud of yourselves." "Of course we are. We finished the fort's work. We killed the pink-haired council woman started. His son," the Hokage said. Everyone in the room looked at him, and after the realization set in, the clan heads started glaring at him with hateful looks, and the civilians' faces clearly showed that they were stunned since they had a flabbergasted expression on their faces. Akemi, being the first person to recover, yelled out, "What do you mean we killed his son? He's the demon and we know it." The pink-haired council woman screeched. The other council members finally managed to regain their senses. Sum snarled as some of her teeth and nails elongated as she glared at the man. "Who was his mother, Sarutobi?" Sum asked. The Hokage looked down and was about to answer when a feminine voice said, his mother was Kushina Uzumaki. Everyone turned to where the voice came from and they saw Makoto glaring at the Hokage. The Shinobi Council gasped at that, except the civilian council looked like that they didn't care in the least. The first one to say anything was a balding council man who had hated Kushina said, of course that demon is the son of that whirlpool whore, started but couldn't finish because a kunai was lodged between his eyes, thrown by Sume, which caused some civilian council members to panic. Hokage. The pink-haired council woman said. That is enough. The Hokage shouted, but then his robes were grabbed by angry Sume. Sume looked at him with rage in her eyes and her nails were digging into his robes. Sume looked ready to kill him and she yelled out, you bastard. I swore a blood oath to Kushina that if something would happen to either of us we would look after the other's children. What the hell gave you the idea that he wouldn't be safe with me protecting? The old Hokage sighed and said, it was for Naruto's protection. If Iwa and Kumo ever found out Minato had a child, then they would have sent assassination or kidnapping missions out for him. Although it seems that it didn't help him in the end, in fact I wonder what would have happened if I did say something about Naruto's parents, then maybe he would still be alive and protected by the people. They would have probably seen him as a hero for being his son. Instead of Iwa, Naruto was killed by the very people that Minato wanted Naruto to be seen as a hero by. Minato is probably rolling around in the Shinigami's stomach in pure anger for what this village has done to him. Can you blame him, Sarutobi? Sarutobi, all of us were friends of Minato and Kushina. What the hell gave you the idea that we would do anything to hurt him? I can say for certain that all of us would gladly fight to protect Minato's child. Minato was a friend to all of us and we would gladly fight to protect his children. You had no right to hide this from us. Choza roared out as he glared at the old man. The Sandaime held his head down in shame and said, I did what I thought was the best thing to do around the time. I wish I could go back and make things right, but I can't. That's right, you can't make things right, Makoto said coldly as her Sharingan came to life as she glared at the Hokage. The Hokage shivered at the sight as she glared at him. Fugaku stared at his wife and knew that he shouldn't say anything if he valued his life. If the Sandaime had a choice between being talked to by an angry Kushina or Makoto, he would rather take on an angry Kushina. I hold Naruto's death on your head, Sarutobi, as I told you that day. He deserved better, Sarutobi. You should have done more. The will of fire you had when you were younger is gone in my eyes since you pretty much decided to be the council's bitch. You are not my Hokage. He never knew why he suffered because you kept it from him. Reap what you have sown, Sarutobi, because the blood of an innocent is on your hands because of your actions, Makoto said coldly. After that she left the room. If she had turned to look back at the man who was the Hokage, then she would have seen tears starting to stream down the old man's face. Nero. Nero was currently walking down the road with his backpack slung over his left shoulder, following the path that the road led down towards the nearest town, hoping to arrive at the nearest town without too much trouble. Nero looked at his gloved hand and then an image of Satsuki appeared in his hand. Nero then balled his hand up into a fist and looked up. Nero then heard something in the forest around him. Nero stopped walking and turned towards the sound in the forest around him and saw several figures rushing towards him. Nero with narrowed eyes stared as the approaching figures with unease. They didn't have a high chakra level, but they did feel unnatural. One of the side effects of his demonic change was not only his new appearance, but from what Kurama had told him, it gave him larger chakra reserve than regular humans and that it had improved his eyesight and sensing. The chakra he was feeling felt foul, corrupted, evil. What was in the forest then jumped out of the cover of the foliage and landed in front of Nero. The creatures looked like large green lizards that stood on their hind legs and had a shield on one of their arms. The creatures hissed at him and Nero eyebrow as he looked at them and thought, Kurama, do you know what these things are? Yes, I do. They are a lower class of demons that are called assaults. They're fast and have the agility to back it up, Kyuubi replied. Thanks, Kurama, Nero thought back. Nero then watched as one ran towards him, thinking that it was going to be an easy kill. Nero stood in the same spot and waited for it to get closer to him. When it was a couple steps away from him, Nero quickly raised his demonic arm and pulled it back behind his head. Nero then launched his fist forward as fast as he could and punched the assault in front of him. The assault was sent flying and skidded across the ground until it crashed into a tree. Nero then blinked out of amazement and whistled as he looked at his covered arm. Kurama, do you have any idea on what this arm can do? Nero asked curiously. Nero wanted to know the full capabilities of his arm and what it could do to the smallest detail. How the hell do you expect me to know what your arm can do? Kurama replied. Because you were sealed inside me before you became my devil arm. Point. But the keyword is was, but I don't know everything about you, like how you kept your true personality that you kept hidden from the world. Nero was about to send another thought to Kurama but stopped when he saw the other assaults rush towards him. Nero jumped away as the slash came down on where he was standing. Nero rolled up the sleeve of his jacket and removed the glove from his hand and placed it in his pants pocket, revealing the demonic arm to the world. Another one of the assaults rushed towards him as another tried to get his right side. Nero then clenched his demonic right hand into a fist and saw that it had a dull blue glow around it. Time to see what this new arm of mine can do, Nero thought. Nero then leaned back to avoid a claw that was aimed at his stomach and grabbed the demon's hand. Nero then lifted the demon up and slammed it on top of the approaching demon's body, slamming them both into the ground. Nero heard several loud cracks and looked down at them and saw that the ground now had several long cracks in the ground, causing Nero to wonder just how strong is he now, but quickly got over it and lifted the demon's body and slammed it into the ground repeatedly. After he did, he lifted it one last time into the air and threw it at another. Nero then looked around and saw more assaults come out of the forest. Kurama, how the do I bring you out? Okay kid, it's very simple, hold your arm out and say my name, Kurama said. Nero stood where he was dumbfounded by how easy it sounded. That's it. Yup, that's it. Now summon me, damn it, and kill these things. Nero placed his demonic arm forward and said, Kurama. A glow came from Nero's right bicep, that was where the tattoo of the fox head was, but it quickly passed and fire arched over his arm and went into his hand. A small ball of fire was in his hand, but then it extended and grew to the point of where it was bigger than his body. The point that grew away from him then launched another ball that seemed to curve into a scythe-like shape. The fire then seemed to harden and take the form of a weapon that looked like a cross between an axe and a scythe. The weapon had a black curved handle and a long blade that resembled a fang. On the bottom of the handle was a large fox head that had pointed ears and large teeth. The last thing that he noticed on the weapon was that it had a metal chain with a small spike attached to the end of the chain. Nero lifted the scythe and smirked, thinking about how much he was going to enjoy this. Nero then cracked his neck and said, this is going to be easy, is I going to be fun. He then lifted the demonic weapon and was a bit surprised by how light it was, but then remembered that he punched one of them into a tree with a single punch and slammed another into the ground repeatedly. He then rushed forward and swung Kurama into a assault's shielded arm, the assault believing that the shield would be enough to protect. It wasn't. The scythe-like axe easily pierced through the shield and embedded itself into the demon's head. He then pulled it out and used the metal fox head on one behind and rammed it into another's stomach. Nero then used his other arm and grabbed the chain and started to spin it over his. The axe flew in the air around him in a circle. It was then that he noticed that the chain grew longer. He then slammed it downwards towards one demon and watched as it embedded itself into its skin. He then pulled on the chain with his normal arm and forced it to come to him and held his demonic arm, except this time a ethereal of demonic arm appeared over. Nero, deciding to ignore the ethereal arm at the moment, his fist back and saw that the ethereal arm did the same. He then launched his arm forward and saw that the ethereal arm did the same. When it collided with the demon was sent flying and skidded on the ground until it stopped. Nero allowed his body to relax as he looked at the dead demons. He then looked at his arm and whistled in amazement and thought, what can't this arm do? I don't know kid, but you should experiment and try discover everything you can about your arm now that it's changed, Kurama said. Agreed, Nero thought back. He then placed the weapon on his back next to his backpack and continued on the road. After a bit of walking down the road, he decided to ask Kurama a question. So Kurama, I once read that you and the other Biju were part of the Jubi, right? Yes, we were part of the Jubi once, but obviously not anymore. He was powerful and a bit awkward in some regards to other devils. Some devils said that his power was near that of Sparta, but I myself don't believe that. Sparta was fighting for selfless reasons and for his loved ones. No one can beat a man like that easily and expect to win unscathed. The Jubi was awkward. How exactly? Before the cataclysm which led to the shinobi way around your ancestors' time, he saw humans as a weak species that didn't deserve their place, but he found them fascinating due to their inventions and their wars. But one of the things that fascinated him the most were guns. Guns? Nero thought curiously. He didn't know what the weapons looked like, but if the Jubi of all things was interested in them, then they had to be good weapons. Yes, guns which fired what humans called bullets. Allow me to show, though I warn you now, you will get a bit of a headache. Kurama then started pouring images into his head, which caused his head to slightly hurt. Nero placed his hands on top of his head and saw memories flash through his eyes. A man with large hands was taking a gun apart piece by piece and then build it back together. He then watched as the man then started to make what Nero guessed was bullets for the gun. He then loaded the bullets into his gun and Nero watched as the man fired the rounds one at a time. What the was that? Nero thought. That was bits and pieces of the Jubi's memories. Each the Biju have a piece of him inside of us since we originated from him, so we each have some memories from him and a piece of his power. I suggest that when we stop at the nearest town we try to find a inn first to rent a room and then a blacksmith to make your own gun. Okay, one last question though and then I'll be done. Why didn't he attack sooner, like before the cataclysm instead of after? He thought that it would be better to wait and attack when it would be easier, when no one could stop him. Think about it, what better time to attack when the bloodline of Sparta is dead or supposed dead? Nero nodded his head, seeing the logic behind it, and continued down the road. He eventually made it to a town and had a small smile on his face. He pulled the glove out of his pocket and rolled down the sleeve of his jacket, covering his demonic arm completely. He then sent Kurama away so that no one would see it. It would look pretty strange if you saw a kid walking into town with a scythe-like axe on his back, wouldn't it? After a couple minutes he found an inn called the Sleeping Lion Hotel. Nero, thinking that it would probably be for the best, decided to enter the hotel. The hotel was radically deserted on the first floor, but then Nero looked over at the clock and saw that it was close to midnight. Nero then looked over at the counter and saw a woman over at the counter who had a somewhat pale skin color and brown hair. Nero went up to the counter and said, "Miss, can you help me?" The woman looked down and saw Nero and said, "Yes, is there something you need?" Nero nodded his head and replied, "Yeah, I need a room for couple of days, can you lend me one?" "Yes, I can. Is it just you?" "Yeah, just me." Nero then pulled some of his money out of backpack and paid for the room. The room was good, better than what he lived in to say the least. The room had a large bed and had place for him to place his clothes and a bathroom with a large tub. Nero just placed his back on the counter and jumped on the bed, decided to get some sleep. Morning in Konoha. Satsuki ran through the streets with her mother close behind her and saw that people were partying and drinking in celebration of the riddance of what the people were saying, the demon spawn. Satsuki wondered what they were talking about but stopped when she got to Ichiraku sat in one of the chairs. "Hayayame, Tuki." The small Uchiha cried happily, a large smile on her face. The two aforementioned cooks smiled back at the girl, a pang of grief however appearing soon after that only Makoto saw. No doubt it was caused by the absence of her usual eating partner. "Isn't Naruto here yet?" Well, Naruto is," the man began, his eyes avoiding the gaze of the small girl. They met with her mother's eyes, which held a saddened look at the reason as to why the boy wasn't here. However, the gazes also held traces of something akin to a plea to keep quiet, as if asking him to stay quiet is to keep the childlike purity that Satsuki still had. He was sent away by the Hokage, so he won't be back for a bit. Although the lie worked on the girl, her countenance still fell, but he promised he'd meet me and Mom here tomorrow. Satsuki was saddened and Makoto noticed her daughter's downtrodden expression and tried to cheer her up by saying, now, no long faces. Naruto wouldn't like to see you like this if he was here, so why don't we see a smile, He's always said that he likes it when you smile, even calling you cute. Instantly, Satsuki's face broke out into a furious blush that would put a tomato to shame at the thought of her crush calling her cute. After they had a small order of ramen to go, they then made their way back to the Uchiha compound. As the people were partying, Makoto couldn't wait for the Sandaime to make his announcement and tell them that Naruto was the son of their hero, the one they had beaten and in the end killed. Satsuki herself was wondering who or what the demon spawn was. When they passed through the gates, Satsuki bumped into another man and got separated from her mother. She then looked up and found herself looking at another member of the Uchiha clan talking to another man. The first man then said, I know, I'm just glad that brat is dead. Demon brat? Satsuki asked curiously. The man looked down hearing her say that and decided to say, seeing no harm in it. It was just that kid Naruto Uzumaki. He answered, unaware of the spike of killing intent directed at him. Before he could get another word out, he was punched in the face by a furious Makoto. Makoto then looked down at Satsuki and saw a shocked face that then turned into sadness as tears gathered behind her eyes. Naruto, she sobbed out. Fresh tears started to flow like a fountain, as the realization that her best friend and crush were gone. She then screamed out in sorrow for her friend, Naruto. Nero woke up peacefully and wished that he could turn in and sleep some more, but his body prevented him from sleeping and his brain told him that he had stuff to do. Nero sighed and decided to take a quick shower to get off the stench from last night's journey. As he made his way to the shower, he felt more relaxed than he ever did in Konoha, even on the best of days there. As the hot water came onto his body, he felt a strange feeling of relief that came from nowhere, as if a large burden had been taken off his shoulders since he came to this small village. That's when he realized he didn't have to treat his life anymore as a battle to survive. Every day was practically a battle to see if had the right to survive, the right to live, but that wasn't the case anymore. He was free. Free from having to look over his shoulder and see people look like they were getting ready to attack him, free of all of the glares of pure and absolute hatred that screamed that he should be dead and forgotten. He was free of all the pain, all the sadness. He now had a new chance at life, a fresh start at living. He wasn't a fool, though he knew that there would be more pain as he continued living, whether it be physical or mental pain as he continued living, and the path he decided to take would depend on that though. Though he did have some ideas on what he would do after he decided to leave this village and move on, but for now he would simply get some more food and some better clothes for traveling later on after he managed to get a job, but first he had to find the local blacksmith. Nero stepped out of the shower and put his clothes back on and grabbed his bag as he made his way down to the first floor for breakfast. When he got down onto the first floor and saw breakfast, his mouth practically drooled at the sight. Well, someone is hungry, a feminine voice said. Nero turned towards the voice and saw that it was the woman from last night. You're up early, and considering how late you came in last night, I thought that you would sleep through the morning and into the afternoon. Nero sent a small greeting her way and got onto a chair and said, I always wake up early no matter what time I fall asleep at. It got drilled into my system that I don't need much sleep. The woman looked at him curiously, wondering what reason would be needed for one to wake up so early. She then casted the thought aside and thought that she shouldn't dwell on it since his reasons were his own. Well then, eat up, you must have a lot of stuff on your mind, and I hope you enjoy your stay. Nero nodded and then started eating the food at a somewhat leisure pace. The food, it tasted so good, he never had anything like this in Konoha. The reason was simple: he couldn't afford it. The people in Konoha did whatever they could do to hurt him in whatever way possible. They made him pay 3 times as much for old rotten food that was doomed to spoil in less than a week's time. Well, Nero was happy about that, and the pros of leaving already far outweighed the cons even though he left Konoha last night. A thought then entered his head at the thought that the people of Konoha were probably celebrating his death, getting drunk and celebrating as if there was no tomorrow. But even though he was happy about leaving, his heart still ached from what he left behind. A tear went down his cheek as he ate his food, knowing that he had caused people to suffer because of his action. He didn't really care about the pain that he had caused to the Hokage. In his eyes, he was just as guilty as the villagers for letting them do whatever they wanted to do with him and for lacking the spine to actually back up his claims as the Hokage. The Anbu that protected him, he didn't know the one and the dog mask that well, but he didn't hurt him and actually protected him against the villagers. The one in the cat and snake mask made him sigh after he took a bite of his food. They were nice and treated him like a sibling would, like Itachi did. Ichiraku Ramen, they had never treated him badly, never overpriced him on food, and were always nice to him. Makoto Uchiha, the closest person that Nero saw as a mother. She was always kind to him, treated him to ramen, and was always there for him when he needed help, no matter how busy she was. But the one that caused him the most pain was Satsuki. She was always honest with him and didn't insult him like most of the other kids did. She was the brightest ray of hope in that village of darkness and hatred. She was always so nice to him, so sweet. Yet the best reason of all was he didn't have to prove anything to her. Satsuki had accepted him with open arms, and he didn't have to prove that he was worth spending time with or anything of the sort. She was the first person in that village where he didn't have to fight to prove he was worth it. She had accepted him without any conditions or with any strings attached to it. The bond that he had with her was the strongest and the most precious thing that he had in the world, and he would do anything to preserve it and protect her. Nero didn't understand the feelings he had for Satsuki, but he knew that they were strong. One day he would return to her in that hell hole and protect her from harm. Even if it cost him his life. After he finished eating, Nero thanked her and made his way out into the town, and thought, I'm going to be here for a while, though it doesn't really matter, I'm in the clear already. If they notice the trap door in the building, they will be looking for a blonde-haired kid with blue eyes, tanned skin, with whisker marks on his cheeks. I'm a silver-haired kid with pale skin and a clear face. I'm definitely safe from getting found. Nero eventually found himself at a weapon shop and entered the shop. Kid, what the hell are you doing in here? A rough voice asked. Nero turned to his left and saw a large burly man with brown hair and long beard. Nero turned to the man and looked at him with impassive eyes, and said, I want to make a custom weapon. Why would a kid want a weapon? He asked with narrowed eyes. Nero looked at him with the same impassive eyes and said, Don't look at me like that, I'm a customer. Now, are you interested or not in making a lot of cash? The man kept looking at Nero and then sighed and said, Fine, what do you need? I need you to make a custom weapon. Nero then asked for several pieces of paper and a pencil, which the man gave him. Nero made a sketch of the gun design that he wanted along with several descriptions of how the inner mechanisms work. The man's eyes widened when he read that and couldn't help but gape at the kid in front of him coming up with such a weapon. Kid, do you want this made out of normal metal or made out of chakra metal? Chakra metal, Nero said. The man's eyes widened even more and then said, Kid, this is going to cost you quite the pretty penny to produce this. Can you even afford this? Nero put his hand into his backpack and pulled out a large wad of cash and said, This enough to pay for it all? The man nodded his head, stupefied by the large wad of cash and the kid altogether. When can I expect it to be done at the earliest? Possibly a week at the latest, the man said dumbly. Nero pulled out some more money and said, If you finish it in less than a week, you get more. Do I make myself clear? You make yourself very clear, little man. I'll let you know when it's done. I'll stop by the end of the week. You have it done by then, you'll get extra pay. Kid, why do you have so much money? No kid like you should have this much money. The smith looked at Nero, and when he looked into his eyes, they looked like two large blue glaciers. When he first looked at them, they looked like the eyes of a warrior or a soldier. They weren't the eyes of a child, that someone his age should have. He should have eyes that showed joy or a happiness and a minor tinge of ignorance to the world. Nero's eyes, they told a story of hardship and pain unlike anything he could imagine. I would tell you, but then you would pity me, and I don't want to be pitied by anyone right now. After all, to everyone else my life would make a good horror story. I'm staying at an inn called the Sleeping Lion, let me know when it's done. After Nero said that, Nero left the shop without looking back with the intent to train with Kurama in his devil arm from. As Nero left, the man couldn't help but wonder what would make a child act like that, and what horrors has he been through. Those cold blue eyes were the eyes of someone who has seen death more than once. Tanzaku Guy. A woman with blonde hair and wearing a green jacket with the kanji for gamble written in black on the back, inside a red circle. Underneath it she wore a gray, kimono-style blouse with no sleeves, held closed by a broad, dark bluish-gray obi that matches her pants. Her blouse is closed quite low, revealing her sizable cleavage. The last thing was her open-toed sandals with high heels. She was currently in front of a slot machine and placed some money in hope to get the jackpot. Come on, said another woman wearing a long black kimono with trimmings, held closed by a white obi, and open-toed sandals with low heels. She was standing next to the machine, hoping the woman playing won't lose as she held 2 buckets. The next screen landed on another 7. Come on, one more 7, the woman said with brown hair, wearing black said. Her eyes lit up with hope. The woman with blonde hair eyes widened a bit. Could I really win? She thought to herself. Suddenly the final screen stopped on a 7. She won. Why? Screamed the woman in black. Lady Tsunade, you finally won. I won, the woman now known as Tsunade stuttered. That's impossible, I never win. Tsunade with wide eyes as she filled the buckets with the money that she had won from the machine. After she filled the bucket with her winnings, she tried again for the jackpot on a different machine and won again, and again. Shizune was so happy her master Tsunade is on a roll. 2 buckets full of money were on the floor. No matter how many times Tsunade played the game, she just kept on winning. But how? Tsunade thought with worry. Lady Tsunade, you're finally winning, Shizune spoke with happiness. Finally you might be able to pay off your debts. This can't be good. I never win, especially not this many times in a row, Tsunade thought as she won again and placed the money into her bucket. Something is definitely not right here. Shizune, we are leaving, Tsunade ordered. But why? Shizune asked. You're winning, and this place has some great hot springs we could use. Don't argue with me, damn it. Tsunade spoke with a tone that meant no arguments, making Shizune wince when she heard the tone of voice her master used. I simply can't win, it's not possible for me to get this lucky. Tsunade picked up the 2 buckets full of her winnings and walked towards the door, mentioning for Shizune to follow. When the 2 ladies reached the front door of the casino, they saw 2 men in front of the doors. Tsunade and Kushina recognized both of them. They were Itachi and Kakashi, wearing the standard shinobi outfit. When the 2 saw them, Kakashi pointed at them and walked over at them with Itachi following him. Tsunade, Shizune, it has been while, hasn't it? Itachi said emotionlessly as he looked at them. Tsunade glared at the 2 and said, what the hell do you 2 want? Kakashi sent a eye smile her way and said, now that isn't a proper greeting now, is it? After he said that, his eye smile quickly faded away and he said, doesn't matter really. Either way, the Hokage has ordered you and Jiraiya to return to the Hidden Leaf Village, and we are to make sure that you do go back. Tsunade glared at the 2 and then dropped the buckets that she held and cracked her knuckles. Why the hell would I return back to the Leaf Village? I vowed to never return to that place that has robbed me of everything I loved. Because if you don't, you and Shizune will be placed as missing nin by order of the Hokage himself, Itachi said. Shizune, who was behind Tsunade, gasped as Tsunade's eyes widened and then her face turned into a perfect image to represent rage as she yelled, you're lying. You got to be. I have Sannin travel rights, and Sarutobi sensei has let me do as I wished for the last couple of years, so why would he start now? I assure you, Tsunade, that we aren't lying and have proof that you are to return to the Leaf Village immediately by any means necessary, Itachi said as he pulled out a letter in an envelope from his pouch and threw it to Tsunade, who caught it effortlessly. After Tsunade grabbed the envelope, she opened it up and grabbed the letter in it and saw that it was written in her sensei's handwriting. When she finished reading, she could not believe what she was reading, that her own sensei would do this to her. Itachi and Kakashi were glad that before the ninja left to track down the Sannin, he gave them each a scroll filled with his threat and his specific orders to return to Leaf Village, because if he didn't they might have gone into a all-out brawl and destroyed several buildings in the process in an attempt to capture Tsunade. Why would he do this now of all times? Kakashi looked at her with an uncaring look in his eye and said, "That is what you will find out when you get there, now is it? Now if I were you I would hurry back to the Leaf Village." Shizune then led Tsunade to their rooms to pack their bags. After they left, Kakashi grabbed the 2 buckets filled with chips that Tsunade left behind in her stupor and made his way to the counter. "You are seriously going to do that?" Itachi asked with a raised eyebrow as he looked at his counter. Kakashi said thank you as he handed over the chips while the woman at the counter looked at them for a moment and then shrugged her shoulders and gave him large sum of cash. When he looked back at Itachi he sent him an eye smile and said, "Yes it was. Think about, I did a service actually. I mean, why let such a large amount of chips which could go for quite the pretty sum of cash be left out for anyone to grab? I'm making sure that it doesn't go to waste." Itachi shook his head and made his way out of the casino to find Tsunade and Shizune and make sure that they don't try to skip town, with Kakashi following while he stuffed some cash into his pouch. Jiraiya, a tall man with dark green kabuki pants and a kabuki shirt, under it was a fishnet shirt as well. Over shirt, he wore a red sage coat with matching yellow circles in front. He had long spiky gray hair and a noticeable wart on his nose. On his back was a large scroll and on his forehead was a forehead protector with kanji for oil, was currently in front of a hot springs not too far from Konoha and was currently peeping on woman for his next book. This was the toad sage Jiraiya. Jiraiya giggled pervertedly as he wrote something down on a small notepad that he had always kept on hand. "Hey ladies, there is a pervert spying on you," a familiar voice yelled. Jiraiya's eyes widened and before he could react the door to the springs burst open and about 20 women all clad in towels turned and glared on him, releasing a large amount of killing intent on him. One of the women stepped forward and yelled, "Get him, girls." After that was said, all of the women charged at him and savagely beaten him to a bloody pulp. After an hour of Jiraiya getting beaten with a maniacal laughter heard in the background, Jiraiya was beaten with bruises all over his body with blood pouring out of his body at certain parts. After they left satisfied with their work, he then heard a familiar voice say, "See Kurenai, I told you we would find the pervert here." Jiraiya got up and looked for the familiar voice and saw Anko, who was grinning evilly next to Kurenai. "Yes Anko, you were right, I should have expected this, to be perfectly honest," Kurenai said as he shook her head in disappointment. "Ah well, what is some of Konoha's lovely kunoichi doing here of all places?" Jiraiya asked with a smile as he looked at the 2 kunoichi. Anko's grin faded away and was replaced with serious look on her face that scared Jiraiya Morhen when she wasn't. The reason why was because Anko was only serious the matter called for it, and that was rare. Very rare. Kurenai stepped forward and glared at him and said, "By order of the Sandaime Hokage, you are to return to the Hokage immediately." Jiraiya. Kurenai glared at the man and wanted to beat him to an inch of his life, not only for him spying on woman in the hot springs, but also because of him abandoning his godson when he needed people to watch over him. Kurenai wouldn't admit it openly, but she was questioning the supposed greatness of Konoha's best and wisdom of people like the Hokage and Sannin. "Well, you're going to have to tell him to wait a bit because I still..." "It's not a request Jiraiya, it's an order, and if you don't return soon you will face the consequences." Kurenai interrupted as she glared at the man. Jiraiya looked at her and asked, "What consequences? Sensei knows that I can go as I please and I got my spy network to maintain." "While that would be the case normally, it's not anymore. See, the Hokage has demanded for your immediate return, and if you're not back in a couple of days you will be marked as AS ranked missing nin," Anko said with a smirk that clearly said, "Victory." Jiraiya quickly turned and looked at Anko with wide eyes and pointed at her as he said, "You kidding? You got to be. Sensei knows how important my spy network is to Konoha. So you got to be lying." When he was done saying that, he expected her shoulder to slump down and say that she was lying. What he did not expect was for her smirk to grow, showing off some of her teeth as she pulled a letter out of her kunai pouch and threw it to Jiraiya and quickly opened it up, hoping that it was some kind of prank, that they were playing a prank on him. When he opened it up and saw his sensei's writing, he couldn't help but feel slightly afraid, wondering what has his sensei so riled up. As he read it, he couldn't help but gape in disbelief at his sensei's threat. He looked over at the two kunoichi, who had looks of victory on their face, and said, "What happened? What happened to piss sensei off this much?" Kurenai looked at her and she said, "I'm not saying anything, Jiraiya, but we weren't the only ones sent out to find you. Kakashi and Itachi were sent out to find Tsunade and bring her back to the village with the same threat as you. Why? Why? Please tell me why." "We won't tell you why, Jiraiya, but I will say this, Jiraiya. It's Judgment Day for you and Tsunade," Kurenai said as she glared at him. After she said that, a feeling of foreboding washed over him, and he had a feeling that him and Tsunade were going to suffer. A few days later in Konoha. A couple days have passed since then, and both of them were feeling something else on the matter. Jiraiya wondered what could have made his sensei mad enough to call both him and Tsunade mad enough to call them back and go so far as to make them both missing nin if they don't come back by the end of the week. Tsunade was angry and looked somewhat stoic, except for the scowl of anger that she had on her face, but on the inside she was resisting the urge to cry. Ever since her return back into the Leaf Village, Sarutobi had placed several Anbu on watch, making sure that she didn't drink any alcohol, and had to resist the urge to cry as the memories of her loved ones that she lost kept coming back into her head. She knew that if she returned to the village, that their memories would keep coming back to her and bring her nothing but pain. She was angry at her sensei, but she couldn't help but wonder what happened to her sensei. She vowed to never return to Konoha, and he understood her reason. He didn't try to stop her at all. Now he was giving her a choice to either come back to the Leaf Village peacefully or be marked down as a missing nin. For her and Shizun's sake, she knew that she couldn't afford to be marked down as a missing nin. She had ran into Jiraiya earlier, and he didn't have any idea as to why Sarutobi had gone this far, but both of them had a feeling of foreboding. They noticed that the people were happy, with only a select few who seemed depressed over something. Shizun tried to get her to get Tsunade to relax earlier, but to no avail, with both worry and fear that haunted Tsunade to no end. Right now the two of them were in front of the door that led to the Hokage's office. Both of them looked at the other's eyes and waited for the other to open the door. Jiraiya then sighed and opened the door, having enough of waiting for Tsunade to open the door, and decided to just get it over with. When he opened the door, he saw their sensei looking at them with a stoic look that also radiated an aura of power that made the two Sannin afraid. In front of them was the true god of shinobi. "Hello, Jiraiya. Tsunade, it's been a long time, hasn't it?" the Sandaime said coldly. Both of Sannin looked at him as if he had grown a second head. Jiraiya was the first to get over the way his sensei was acting. Said, "Sensei, it's good to see you again, and I'm sure that Tsunade." Before he could finish what he was saying, Tsunade interrupted him by saying, "Cut the crap, Jiraiya, and let's get straight to the point. Sensei, what is this really about?" Sarutobi looked at her with cold eyes and said, "Indeed, I'm rather glad you asked me that, Tsunade. You see, I decided that it was high time to clean house, if you will." "Well, that great, Sensei, when Jiraiya said, but before he could finish his sentence, Sarutobi interrupted him by saying, "I already did. Danzo and my advisors are out of the way, and I'm dealing with the Civian Council and taking away more of their power by the day." "That's great, Sensei. But if you are already doing well, then why did you need us to come back?" Jiraiya asked curiously. "Because both of you were next on the list," he stated evenly. Causing both of the Sannin's eyes to widen in disbelief. "Tell me, Tsunade, Jiraiya, do you have any regrets since leaving the village?" he asked coldly. "Well, some, yeah. You know why I couldn't be here. I have a spy network to maintain, one that has stopped many threats to this village and saved thousands from dying. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, no matter how much I would prefer they didn't," Jiraiya said. "I don't have any regrets since I left the village, and you know why, Sensei." Tsunade said, trying to put up a strong front, but she honestly felt like crying as the memories in her head became stronger from her sensei's question. The Sandaime was quiet for a few minutes as his face remained as stoic as it did ever since they first entered the room, and the next words were like knife being driven into Tsunade's heart, not even leaving behind Kushina's son, your godson, to fend for himself. Tsunade's eyes widened as tears started to stream down her eyes. She glared at her sensei and yelled, "Don't you dare use," but before Tsunade could finish what she was going to say, Sarutobi released his killing intent and glared at his female student. Sarutobi spoke in a voice just above a whisper, yet it seemed like he yelled to the two Sannin. "I have every right to ask that of you, Tsunade, unlike you who should demand of me to not use her name like that." After he said that, Tsunade started realizing that he was right. She had abandoned her duty as Naruto's godmother. Tsunade then started sobbing as tears started to go down her cheeks. "Now hold on, sensei, I know that we haven't," Jiraiya said, but was interrupted by his sensei, who glared at him and said, "Oh, that's a understatement, Jiraiya. You don't know a damn thing about him like I do, like I had encouraged you to be. Hell, even a letter is better than nothing. I have decided that you will pay the price. As of now, all of your accounts and assets have also been frozen, and you will be demoted in rank as well. At the moment, neither of you can leave the village." But sensei, how will we support ourselves then?" Jiraiya asked as he looked at his sensei with wide eyes. "By doing D ranks that all genin do, since both of you will be that after you avoided all of your responsibilities, especially as Naruto's godparents." Sarutobi yelled back at him angrily. "Zhe Gen, Jiraiya said, stupefied by the answer. "I'm sorry," Tsunade sobbed, once in her life completely sober and had been for the last few days. With the haze gone from her mind, all of the pain she normally drunk away was flooding back into her, making it difficult to even bother going on. "Then we'll make it up to the kid starting now, I swear it, sensei," Jiraiya said, in an attempt to calm his sensei. Only for it to backfire on him. Killing intent started to leak into the room, causing the two Sannin to stop what they were doing and look at him fearfully. Sarutobi turned around and looked at both of his students, and he said coldly to them, "Sorry doesn't bring back the dead, Tsunade. It's not my forgiveness that you should be asking for, it's Naruto's, and sorry doesn't bring someone back from the dead." Both of the Sannin's eyes widened in disbelief, and Jiraiya said, "The dead?" "Yes. Jiraiya, Naruto died a couple of days ago, when his apartment was set on fire a few days ago. I am going to tell the village tomorrow about who they have been abusing all of these years, and the funeral will be held on the end of the week." Tsunade's tears started to come out faster as her tears started to go down faster as she said, "It can't be." A frown formed on her sensei's face as he said, "I'm afraid so. I have already cried for him several times, but I won't let him be remembered as the demon that was killed. You can grieve, but I expect to see both of you at the funeral, even if I have to order Anbu to drag both of you there." After he said that, Anbu entered the room and led them to where they would be staying. Tsunade was currently in an apartment that was similar to the one that Naruto had, minus the rats and the roaches. She looked at the room and saw that the plumbing seemed to just be barely working, and the paint on the walls was chipped and cracking as well. When she first saw the room, she thought, did Naruto have to live like this? When she asked one of the Anbu that escorted her to the apartment, she was surprised when one of the Anbu told her that Naruto lived in something even worse than this. Shizune was given a good apartment with plenty of food with a weekly income, and was told by Sarutobi that she couldn't have Tsunade stay there with her until he decided that he could and would have her meet Inoichi to help Tsunade get over the past. As Tsunade sat there, the memories of all those that she lost kept coming into her head. So far she had lost her fiancé and brother on a fool's quest of becoming Hokage. If that wasn't enough, she was stupid enough to go drink and gamble so much of her family's fortune, disgracing her heritage and making her clan's name a joke among the elemental nations. To the point that people even began calling her the legendary sucker, making casinos begin to rub their hands in glee when they learned she was coming. Tsunade missed out on raising a child that she could have considered her grandson, but because she was so lost in her drunken state that she refused to take responsibility for the young boy that she promised Kushina that she would take care of if anything ever happened to the redhead and Minato. If only she kept her promise, then maybe some of her own pain could have been healed and the pain that Naruto went through could have been prevented. If only she was there for Naruto, then he wouldn't have been cheated out of being a shinobi and living a true happy life. He would have had his clan's name backing him as would have been his birthright. If only Tsunade kept her promise to Kushina, then Naruto would never have had to experience so much pain before he died. He would have had a real chance at living and not a fake one. I deserve this, Tsunade said miserably as she brought her hands to her face and began to cry. Jiraiya sat in a similar apartment to Tsunade's with a rare expression of seriousness as he thought about what he had done. True, he couldn't watch Naruto constantly due to his spy network, but that didn't mean that he couldn't visit every once in a while just to say hi and have a chat with him for a bit. He knew that Naruto's life was going to be bad. He had told Minato that from the start before he sealed the Kyuubi into Naruto and had begged his student to let him do it, but his stupid apprentice just wouldn't listen, and thought Naruto would be the symbol of hope for everyone of a brighter tomorrow. All it did was make his godson into a symbol of their hatred and a reminder of a dark day, a horrible when so many people had died. It was during his time away from his sensei after the confrontation with him and Tsunade over what they did to Naruto did Jiraiya realize how much of a failure he had become. How much he should have done for Naruto, but didn't do it, and now couldn't because the boy was dead. He had failed them. He had failed the people that were closest to him and those that were the closest thing that he would ever had to a family. Minato the son he never had, Kushina the daughter he never had, and Naruto the grandson that he had failed. He had failed all three of them in less than a day as he thought, I'm sorry I failed all of you. Jiraiya was brought out of his musings when he heard two poofs, and saw smoke appear in front of him. When the smoke cleared he saw two toads wearing cloaks in front of him, one had green skin and white hair, and was wearing a lighter colored cloak, while the other one had whitish skin with purple and was wearing a black cloak. They were the Fukasaku and Shima, the two sage toads of Mount Myoboku. Jiraiya blinked a few times to see if his eyes were deceiving him and then said, Pa, what are you doing here? Jiraiya asked. Shima looked at Jiraiya and said quickly, Jiraiya, it's good to see you, but we came to tell that something has happened. Jiraiya's eyes widened and he asked quickly, what happened ma that got you two so riled up? Fukasaku then stepped forward and said, Jiraiya boy, it's about the great prophecy, it's changed. Jiraiya gasped in surprise as Fukasaku then told him of what the great prophecy now said. After they told him of what the prophecy now said, they then left Jiraiya alone to collect his thoughts as they kept running back to what they said to him. He then jumped up and ran as fast as he could to the Hokage tower to let him know of the prophecy. A few days later. A few days had passed since Jiraiya had told Sarutobi about the change in the prophecy and him and Tsunade were officially demoted to genin. Right now a bunch of people were gathered in front of a memorial wearing black. Surprisingly there were a lot of civilians there, though they weren't cheering like they originally did when they heard that he had died. Many of them were crying and felt a deep regret for what they had done to him. At first they couldn't believe that he was the son of the man that saved them and all of the monstrous things that they have done to him. Many people had committed suicide when the Hokage had told them about who Naruto's parents were. The fourth Hokage simply asked for the child to be seen as a hero. And they spat on his wish and claimed that they knew what he wanted, when he had already made it known. Everyone that had cared about Naruto and knew that he wasn't the beast was there, which included the Ichirakus, Sarutobi, Anko, Yugao, Kakashi, Kurenai, Jiraiya, Tsunade, Shizune, Makoto, Itachi, and Satsuki. While Jiraiya and Tsunade felt guilty and sad about Naruto's death, their sadness was nothing compared to Satsuki's. Makoto sometimes would have to force her to eat and go outside and get some fresh air. Makoto noticed that the way Satsuki was acting was similar to a woman who just lost her husband in a war. Near the end of the funeral, Satsuki stared at the photo of her late friend and then clenched her hand into a fist as a look of determination came across her face and thought, Naruto, you talked about being Hokage, you talked about fulfilling your dream about being the next Hokage. Since you can't fulfill it, I will fulfill it for you. One day I will be named Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village, this I promise you, and I won't ever go back on it, this I swear. If people looked into her eyes, they would have saw that her eyes were no longer the same. Her eyes were now red with a single black tomo in each of them with a fire that could never be extinguished. Nero. Nero walked down to the blacksmith's wearing his usual clothing with the black hood of his jacket over his head, covering his head from the rain that fell from the sky. Nero had his pack slung over his shoulder and intended to leave as soon as the blacksmith was done to leave town and move on. The locket that Satsuki had given him was underneath his shirt to protect it from getting wet. When he stood in front of the shop, he opened the door and saw Smith look at him. He then pulled down the hood with his gloved hand and said, "Hey old man, is it done?" After the man sighed, he said as he went for a black box, "Yeah, it's done, kid. Here you go." When he stood in front of Nero, he placed it on the counter for Nero to get a better look at. The weapon was in the form of a L. The lower section of the weapon had a brown grip with a golden trim. The weapon was mainly black and had a barrel underneath the first weapon with the chamber of the weapon the same color as well. On the top of the first barrel there was an inscription in golden that said, "Guardian." "It's perfect," Nero said and handed him the money. It came out better than he had hoped. The reason he had just the gun made was because he wasn't sure that the guy could make bullets. So instead he had the weapon formed out of chakra metal. He could push his chakra into the weapon and have it remain there until he pulled the trigger. Until the trigger was pulled, it would remain there and become more dense. So instead of firing bullets like it originally did, it fires chakra blasts. After he paid for the weapon, he made his way out of village with enough food in his pack to last him for a while. After he was outside of the village, he called for Kurama in his form and placed it on his back. While they would make their way to the next village, Kurama decided that he would teach him some sealing techniques for storage to be able to carry more supplies. Nero walked down the road and thought, I'll find the swords of my ancestors and make a mark on history that won't be forgotten. But most of all, I will see Satsuki again, that I promise on my blood. While that is kinda romantic and a rather good speech, kid, I have one question. Kurama said. What? How are you going to find their weapons? Kurama asked. Nero was quiet for a few seconds, but then he just sighed and thought, we will, it's me, remember, and I'm the luckiest bastard alive.